Before we begin, take a breath. Feel the air moving in and out. You are not your thoughts, not your past, not even the story that brought you here. If this moment feels quiet, that is not emptiness, it is space. And in that space, you begin to wake up. If you wish to explore this depth of awareness, to live from stillness rather than from noise, subscribe and let us journey into the now together. There is a moment that arrives in the life of every awakening soul, a moment so subtle that most pass through it without recognition, and yet so profound that once seen, it changes everything. It is the moment when you realize that the need to explain yourself, to justify your existence, to defend your choices to those who cannot yet see beyond the veil of their own mental constructs, this need is not a bridge to understanding, but a chain that binds you to an old way of being. It is the moment when you understand, not intellectually but in the very marrow of your awareness, that some people are not ready to meet you where you are. And that is not a tragedy. It is simply what is. The air you breathe right now carries within it the same oxygen that has moved through countless lungs across countless generations. Each breath is ancient and new simultaneously. Feel it entering your body, this gift that asks nothing of you, that requires no explanation, no defense, no story. It simply is. And in this moment, so are you. But somewhere along the way, perhaps in childhood, perhaps in the countless small moments of conditioning that shape a human life, you learned that being was not enough. You learned that you must become. You must prove. You must explain. The ego, that curious construction of thought and memory, thrives on explanation. It feeds on the need to be understood, to be validated, to be seen in a particular light by others. Watch it now, if you can, without judgment. Notice how even as these words flow through your awareness, there may be a subtle movement within you, a reaching toward or a pulling away from what is being said. That movement is the ego, always positioning itself, always comparing, always seeking to maintain its story of who you are. And the story it tells is always incomplete, always a fragment of something far vaster than thought can contain. When you were young, perhaps you ran through fields or down hallways, moved by pure aliveness, by the sheer joy of movement itself. There was no story then, no need to explain why you ran, no concern for how you appeared to others. The running was its own completeness. But gradually, imperceptibly, a voice began to form. It asked questions. It made comparisons. It wondered what others thought. And slowly, the spontaneous aliveness became filtered through this voice, this commentator that seemed to be you but was only ever a collection of learned patterns, inherited beliefs, and accumulated fears. This voice, this ego structure, is not your enemy. To make it an enemy is to give it more power, to create yet another layer of resistance and struggle. The ego is simply a tool that became confused about its function. It is meant to be a servant of awareness, a practical mechanism for navigating the world of form. But somewhere in the evolution of human consciousness, the servant began to believe it was the master. The tool began to think it was the hand that wielded it. And in that confusion, suffering was born. Now, in this moment, as you listen to these words, there is an opportunity. Not to fix the ego, not to destroy it, not to transcend it through force of will, but simply to see it. To recognize it as a pattern of thought, a habit of mind, rather than as the totality of what you are. And in that seeing, something shifts. The identification loosens. A space opens. And in that space, you discover what has always been here, beneath the noise, beneath the endless commentary, beneath the need to explain and defend and justify. You discover presence. Presence is not a state you achieve. It is not the result of years of meditation or spiritual practice, though these may help clear away the obstacles to recognizing what is already here. Presence is the ground of your being, the awareness in which all experience arises and dissolves. It is here when you are happy and when you are sad, when you are successful and when you fail, when others understand you and when they do not. It is the constant in a world of variables, the stillness in which all movement occurs. But the ego cannot grasp presence. It can only grasp concepts about presence. It can collect spiritual ideas, accumulate teachings, build an identity around being awakened or conscious or evolved. And in doing so, it creates what might be called the spiritual ego, which is perhaps the most subtle trap of all. The spiritual ego says, I am more aware than you. I have transcended what you are still caught in. I no longer need to explain myself because I am beyond such things. And in that very assertion, it reveals that the old pattern is still running, simply wearing new clothes. True freedom from the need to explain yourself does not come from superiority. It does not come from knowing something others do not know. It comes from a deep acceptance of what is, including the reality that each person is exactly where they need to be in their own journey of awakening. When you meet someone who is deeply identified with their ego, who lives entirely in the realm of mental constructs and emotional reactions, you are not meeting someone who is less than you. You are meeting yourself as you once were, or as you still are in moments when awareness dims and old patterns reassert themselves. There is a profound compassion that arises when you truly see this. Not the compassion of pity, which maintains separation and superiority, but the compassion of recognition. You recognize that the person defending their position, explaining their choices, seeking validation from you, is doing so because they are in pain. The ego is always in pain because it is always incomplete, always threatened, always seeking something outside itself to make it whole. And you know this pain intimately because you have felt it yourself, perhaps still feel it in subtle ways, in the moments when you forget what you are and believe again in the story of who you think you should be. So when someone asks you to explain yourself, to justify your choices, to defend your path, and you feel that old familiar pull to engage, to convince, to make them understand, pause. Feel the breath moving in your body. Notice the sensations present in this moment. The weight of your body wherever you are sitting or standing. The temperature of the air on your skin. The subtle sounds in your environment. And in that noticing, you create a gap between stimulus and response. In that gap, you are free. Free to respond or not respond. Free to engage or to remain silent. Free to offer a simple truth without attachment to whether it is received or rejected. Because you are no longer seeking anything from the interaction. You are no longer trying to prove your worth, defend your existence, or convert another to your way of seeing. You are simply present, and from that presence, whatever needs to happen happens naturally, without force, without struggle. This does not mean you become passive or indifferent. Presence is not detachment in the sense of not caring. It is the deepest form of engagement possible because it is engagement without the filter of ego, without the distortion of fear and desire. When you speak from presence, your words carry a different quality. They are not weapons of defense or tools of manipulation. They are expressions of truth, offered freely, received or not received according to the readiness of the listener. And you remain untouched by the outcome because you are rooted in something that cannot be threatened by another's opinion or understanding. The ancient teachers spoke of this state in many ways. They called it enlightenment, liberation, awakening, self-realization. But these words, like all words, are merely fingers pointing at the moon. They are not the moon itself. And the moon they point to is not somewhere else, not in some future moment when you have finally done enough spiritual practice or accumulated enough wisdom. It is here, now, in the simple awareness that is reading these words, hearing these sounds, feeling the aliveness of this moment. But the mind resists this simplicity. It says, surely awakening must be more than this. Surely there must be some dramatic shift, some permanent state of bliss, some final arrival at a destination called enlightenment. And in that resistance, in that seeking for something other than what is, the mind perpetuates the very illusion that causes suffering. Because the seeking itself implies that you are not already whole, not already complete, not already the awareness you are looking for. Consider the nature of seeking for a moment. When you seek something, you create a relationship between yourself as the seeker and the thing sought. You create separation, distance, time. You place what you want in the future and yourself in the present as someone who lacks it. And this structure of seeking becomes a prison, no matter how spiritual the object of your search. You can seek enlightenment for lifetimes and never find it, not because it is difficult to attain, but because the one who seeks is the very obstacle to recognizing what is already present. This is the great paradox at the heart of all spiritual teaching. You cannot find what you are by seeking it, yet without some initial impulse to look beyond the surface of things, most remain asleep within the dream of ego. The resolution of this paradox is not intellectual. It cannot be thought through or figured out. It can only be realized, which means made real in your direct experience. And that realization often comes not through effort but through exhaustion, not through seeking but through the collapse of seeking, not through gaining something new but through losing something old. What you lose is the belief in the story of yourself. The story that says you are this body, this name, this history, this collection of achievements and failures, this personality with its preferences and aversions. The story is not false exactly. These things exist in the realm of form. But they are not what you are. They are what you appear as, what you express through, what you experience yourself as in the world of time and space. But beneath and beyond and within all of this is something that cannot be captured in a story, something that has no beginning and no ending, something that is aware of the story but is not contained by it. When you touch this awareness, even for a moment, everything changes and nothing changes. The world continues as it was. People continue to act from ego. Challenges continue to arise. But your relationship to it all shifts fundamentally. You are no longer lost in the drama. You are the space in which the drama unfolds. And from that space, there is a natural wisdom that knows when to speak and when to be silent, when to engage and when to step back, when to explain and when to simply let others believe what they need to believe. This wisdom is not learned from books or teachers, though books and teachers may point you toward it. It arises spontaneously from presence itself. It is the intelligence of life moving through you when you are not blocking it with mental resistance, with the need to control outcomes, with the fear of what others might think. And one of the clearest expressions of this wisdom is the recognition that you do not need to explain yourself to those who are not ready to understand. Not ready does not mean inferior. It does not mean less evolved or less intelligent. It simply means that their consciousness is currently identified with patterns that make it impossible for them to see what you are pointing to. They are looking through the lens of ego, and through that lens, everything appears as threat or opportunity, right or wrong, us or them. They cannot see the space in which all these dualities arise because they are completely absorbed in the content of their experience rather than aware of the context. Imagine trying to explain the color blue to someone who has only ever seen in shades of gray. You could use the most eloquent language, the most precise descriptions, the most passionate appeals, and still they would not see blue. Not because they are deficient, but because their perceptual apparatus has not yet opened to that frequency. And your explanation, no matter how skillful, cannot force that opening. It can only happen in its own time, through its own mysterious process of unfoldment. So it is with consciousness. You cannot argue someone into awakening. You cannot convince them through logic or evidence or emotional appeal. The shift from ego identification to presence is not a matter of acquiring new information. It is a matter of a fundamental change in the locus of identity, a shift from thinking you are the content of consciousness to recognizing you are consciousness itself. And that shift happens when it happens, according to factors far beyond the control of any individual will. Your role, if you have one, is not to force this shift in others but to embody it yourself. To be so rooted in presence that your very being becomes an invitation, a reminder, a possibility that others may sense even if they cannot articulate it. Some will be drawn to this quality in you. They will feel something in your presence that they cannot name, a peace or a depth or a freedom that calls to something within them. Others will be threatened by it. They will sense that you are not playing the game of ego, and this will disturb them because it challenges the very foundation of their reality. When you encounter those who are threatened, who react with hostility or judgment or the demand that you explain yourself, justify your choices, prove your worth, remember this, their reaction is not about you. It is about the discomfort they feel when confronted with a way of being that does not fit their mental models. You are holding up a mirror, and what they see reflected disturbs them. But the disturbance is not your responsibility to fix. You cannot make yourself smaller to ease their discomfort. You cannot dim your light to make them feel better about their darkness. All you can do is remain present, remain true to what you know, and allow them to have their experience without taking it personally. Taking things personally is one of the primary ways the ego maintains itself. It interprets everything through the filter of me and mine. When someone criticizes you, the ego says they are attacking me. When someone disagrees with you, the ego says they are rejecting me. When someone does not understand you, the ego says there is something wrong with me or something wrong with them. But all of this is interpretation, story, mental construction. What is actually happening is simply what is happening. Words are being spoken. Emotions are being felt. Energy is moving. And none of it has the meaning the ego assigns to it. When you stop taking things personally, a tremendous freedom arises. You can hear criticism without being diminished by it. You can face disagreement without needing to defend your position. You can be misunderstood without feeling the compulsion to correct every misconception. Because you are no longer deriving your sense of self from others' opinions. You are rooted in something deeper, something that cannot be touched by praise or blame, agreement or disagreement, understanding or misunderstanding. This rootedness in being is what allows you to stop explaining yourself. Not from a place of arrogance or superiority, but from a place of deep inner knowing. You know what is true for you. You know what your path requires. You know what choices serve your highest unfoldment. And this knowing does not need external validation. It does not need others to agree or approve or understand. It is complete in itself, self-evident, arising from the intelligence of presence rather than from the calculations of the thinking mind. But let us be clear about something important. Stopping the need to explain yourself does not mean you never communicate. It does not mean you become silent or withdrawn or isolated. Presence is not absence. It is the fullest possible engagement with life, but from a different ground. When you speak from presence, you may actually communicate more clearly, more authentically, more effectively than when you spoke from ego. Because you are no longer trying to manipulate outcomes or control perceptions. You are simply expressing what is true, and that expression carries a power that ego-driven communication never can. The difference is in the attachment. When ego speaks, it is attached to the response. It needs the other person to react in a certain way, to validate its position, to confirm its story. When presence speaks, there is no attachment. The words are offered like seeds scattered on the wind. Some will land in fertile soil and grow. Others will land on stone and wither. And the one who scattered the seeds remains at peace with either outcome because the act of offering was complete in itself. This is the essence of what might be called spiritual maturity. Not the accumulation of knowledge or experiences or insights, but the capacity to be with what is without needing it to be different. To speak your truth without needing others to accept it. To live your path without needing others to validate it. To be yourself without needing others to understand it. And paradoxically, when you stop needing these things, you often receive them more freely. Because people sense the lack of demand in you, the absence of manipulation, and they relax. They open. They become curious rather than defensive. But even this cannot be a strategy. The moment you think, I will stop explaining myself so that others will be more receptive, you have fallen back into ego. You have made it about outcome again, about getting something, about achieving a result. True freedom from the need to explain comes only when you genuinely do not care whether others understand or not. Not because you are indifferent to them, but because your peace does not depend on their comprehension. There is a story told in the ancient traditions about a master who was accused of fathering a child out of wedlock. The villagers came to him with anger and judgment, demanding explanation, insisting he take responsibility. And the master simply said, "Is that so?" and accepted the child, raising it as his own. Years later, the truth emerged. The real father came forward, and the villagers returned, apologetic, embarrassed, asking for the child back. And the master simply said, "Is that so?" and returned the child without complaint or explanation. This story points to something profound. The master's peace was not dependent on being understood or vindicated. He did not need to defend himself when falsely accused. He did not need to say, "I told you so," when the truth emerged. He simply met each moment as it was, without resistance, without the need to control the narrative. And in that meeting, he demonstrated a freedom that most cannot even imagine, so identified are they with their stories, their reputations, their need to be seen in a particular way. You may not be called to such extreme demonstrations of non-attachment. But in your daily life, in your ordinary interactions, the same principle applies. When someone misunderstands your motives, do you feel the compulsion to correct them? When someone judges your choices, do you feel the need to justify yourself? When someone questions your path, do you feel obligated to explain? And if you do feel these things, can you simply notice the feeling without acting on it? Can you feel the pull of the old pattern without being pulled by it? This is the practice, if we can call it that. Not to eliminate the ego or transcend it through force, but to see it so clearly that you are no longer fooled by it. To recognize the voice of ego when it speaks, to feel the contraction in your body when it activates, to notice the stories it tells and the emotions it generates, and to remain as the awareness that witnesses all of this without being identified with any of it. In that witnessing, something remarkable happens. The ego does not disappear, but it loses its power over you. It becomes like a radio playing in the background. You can hear it, but you are no longer compelled to believe everything it says or act on every impulse it generates. There is space between you and it. And in that space, you are free. Free to choose how to respond rather than react automatically. Free to speak or remain silent according to what the moment requires rather than what the ego demands. Free to be misunderstood without suffering, to be criticized without collapsing, to be alone without loneliness. Because you have discovered that you are never truly alone. You are always held in the embrace of presence, always connected to the source of all being, always home in the deepest sense of that word. Home is not a place. It is not a relationship or a circumstance or a state of affairs in the external world. Home is the recognition of what you are, the remembrance of your true nature, the return to presence. And you can be home anywhere, in any situation, with any person or alone. Because home is not out there. It is here, now, in the simple awareness of being. But the mind will say, this is too simple. Surely there must be more to it. Surely awakening requires years of meditation, rigorous practice, the guidance of a teacher, the study of sacred texts. And yes, these things can be helpful. They can create conditions that support the recognition of what you are. But they are not the recognition itself. The recognition is always immediate, always now, always available. It is not the result of a process. It is the ground from which all processes arise. Think of it this way. The sun is always shining. Even on the cloudiest day, even in the darkest night, the sun is there, radiating light. The clouds do not diminish the sun. The rotation of the earth does not affect the sun's luminosity. These things only affect your perception of the sun. And so it is with presence. It is always here, always shining, always available. But it can be obscured by the clouds of thought, by the darkness of identification with form, by the endless movement of mental and emotional activity. Spiritual practice, at its best, is not about creating presence or achieving enlightenment. It is about removing the obstacles to recognizing what is already here. It is about clearing away the clouds, turning toward the light, opening the eyes that have been closed. And sometimes this happens gradually, through patient practice and gentle inquiry. And sometimes it happens suddenly, in a moment of grace that cannot be predicted or controlled, when all seeking collapses and what remains is simply this, simply now, simply the undeniable reality of being. However it happens, whenever it happens, the recognition brings with it a deep relaxation. Not the relaxation of the body, though that may occur, but a relaxation of the fundamental tension that has been running your life. The tension of trying to become something other than what you are. The tension of defending yourself against the world perceived as threatening. The tension of seeking fulfillment in the future while rejecting the present moment. All of this tension is rooted in the belief that you are a separate self, isolated and vulnerable, needing to protect and promote yourself in order to survive and thrive. When you see through this belief, when you recognize that the separate self is a mental construct rather than an ultimate reality, the tension dissolves. Not because you have solved all your problems or achieved all your goals, but because you have seen that the one who had the problems and goals was itself a kind of dream. And in waking from that dream, you discover that you are not diminished but expanded, not lost but found, not less but infinitely more than you imagined yourself to be. This is not a metaphor. It is not poetic language pointing to something abstract. It is the most concrete, immediate, undeniable reality available to you. More real than your thoughts about yourself. more real than your emotions, your memories, your plans for the future. More real than your body, which is constantly changing, constantly aging, constantly moving toward its eventual dissolution. What you are is what is aware of all these things. What you are is the awareness itself, unchanging, unborn, undying, eternally present. And from this awareness, from this ground of being, you can engage with the world of form without being lost in it. You can have preferences without being enslaved by them. You can pursue goals without being defined by their achievement or failure. You can relate to others without needing them to complete you or validate you or understand you. Because you are already complete. You are already whole. You are already what you have been seeking. This completeness does not mean you stop growing or learning or evolving. The form continues to develop. The personality continues to refine itself. Skills are acquired. Wisdom deepens. But all of this happens within the context of an already existing wholeness rather than as a desperate attempt to become whole. It is the difference between a flower unfolding naturally according to its nature and a person striving to become something they are not. One is effortless, joyful, aligned with the intelligence of life. The other is exhausting, frustrating, perpetually unsatisfying. When you stop trying to explain yourself to those who cannot understand, you are not giving up on communication or connection. You are simply recognizing that true connection happens at a different level than the level of mental agreement. Two egos can argue for eternity and never truly meet. But two presences recognize each other instantly, without words, without explanation, without the need for any story. There is a resonance, a recognition, a sense of coming home to something that was never really lost. This recognition can happen with another person, but it can also happen with a tree, a bird, a stone, the sky. Because presence is not limited to human form. It is the essence of all form, the consciousness that animates all life, the awareness in which all experience arises. When you are present, you can feel this aliveness everywhere. Not as an idea but as a direct perception. The tree is not just an object out there. It is a manifestation of the same life force that animates your body. The bird's song is not just a sound. It is an expression of the same consciousness that is aware of these words right now. Everything is connected, not through some mystical force that needs to be believed in, but through the simple fact of shared being. All forms arise from the same source, exist within the same awareness, return to the same ground. And when you know this, not intellectually but experientially, the sense of isolation that plagues the ego dissolves. You are never separate. You are always part of the whole. And the whole is always present in you, as you, through you. But the ego cannot grasp this. It can only grasp separation, distinction, boundaries. It needs to know where I end and you begin, what is mine and what is yours, who is right and who is wrong. And there is a place for these distinctions in the practical world. They allow for functional interaction, for the organization of society, for the navigation of daily life. But when they are taken as ultimate truth rather than as useful conventions, they create suffering. The suffering of feeling fundamentally alone in a hostile universe. The suffering of needing to constantly defend your territory, your identity, your story. The suffering of never quite feeling enough, never quite arriving, never quite being at peace. All of this suffering is optional. Not in the sense that you can simply decide not to suffer and it will stop, but in the sense that it is based on a misunderstanding that can be seen through. The misunderstanding is the belief that you are only this body, this mind, this person with this particular history and future. And the seeing through happens when you recognize yourself as the awareness in which body, mind, and person appear. This awareness is not personal. It does not belong to you. You belong to it. Or more accurately, you are it, appearing as this particular form for this particular duration in the vast expanse of existence. When this recognition stabilizes, when it becomes your primary identity rather than a temporary insight, you discover a peace that is not dependent on circumstances. Not because circumstances do not affect you, but because you are no longer identified exclusively with the one who is affected. There is a dimension of you that remains untouched, like the depths of the ocean that remain still even when the surface is turbulent with waves. From this depth, you can meet the turbulence of life without being overwhelmed by it. You can face loss without being destroyed. You can experience pain without adding suffering to it. You can be with others in their ego without being pulled into ego yourself. And you can allow others to misunderstand you, judge you, reject you, without taking it as a statement about your worth or your truth. Because your worth is not up for debate. Your truth is not dependent on consensus. You are not a belief system that needs defending or a position that needs justifying. You are the space in which all beliefs and positions arise and dissolve. You are the awareness that is here before thought begins and remains after thought ends. You are what you have always been and what you will always be, regardless of what happens in the realm of form. This is not something you need to achieve or become. It is what you are, right now, in this moment. The only question is whether you recognize it or not. And the recognition is always available. Not tomorrow, not after you have meditated for 10,000 hours or read all the sacred texts or found the perfect teacher. Now. In this breath. In this moment of simple being. Feel it now, if you can. Not as an idea but as a direct experience. The sense of being here, of existing, of awareness itself. It requires no effort. It is effortless. It is what is most intimate to you, closer than your breath, more immediate than your thoughts. It is so obvious that it is easily overlooked. The mind looks for something complex, something dramatic, something other than this simple, ordinary, ever-present awareness. But this is it. This is what all the teachings point to. This is what you are. And when you rest as this, when you abide as awareness rather than as the content of awareness, something shifts in how you relate to everything. The need to explain yourself falls away naturally, not because you have decided it should, but because there is no one left who needs explaining. The ego structure that required constant justification and defense is seen through. It still functions when needed for practical purposes, but it is no longer running the show. It is no longer mistaken for what you are. What runs the show now is presence itself, the intelligence of life, the wisdom that knows without thinking, that acts without calculating, that responds to each moment freshly rather than through the filter of past conditioning. This wisdom is not something you possess. It is what you are when you get out of the way, when you stop trying to control and manipulate and force outcomes, when you allow life to live through you rather than trying to live life according to your limited understanding. This allowing is not passive. It is the most active state possible because it is action without the resistance of ego, without the friction of trying to make reality conform to your preferences. It is action that flows from the source, aligned with the movement of the whole, participating in the dance of existence without stepping on anyone's toes or trying to lead when it is time to follow. And in this dance, you will encounter others who are still learning the steps, still stumbling, still trying to force their way through. They will step on your toes. They will criticize your dancing. They will insist you are doing it wrong. And you will feel the old impulse to explain, to defend, to prove that you know what you are doing. But if you pause, if you return to presence, you will see that their criticism is not about you. It is about their own confusion, their own fear, their own identification with a way of dancing that no longer serves them but that they are not yet ready to release. Your response, then, is not to convince them or correct them or explain yourself to them. Your response is simply to continue dancing, to remain in the flow, to trust the intelligence that moves through you. And perhaps, in your dancing, they will catch a glimpse of a different possibility. Perhaps something in them will recognize the freedom in your movement, the joy in your expression, the peace in your presence. And perhaps that recognition will plant a seed that will grow in its own time. Or perhaps not. Perhaps they will turn away, more convinced than ever that their way is the only way. And that too is perfect. That too is part of the dance. Because you are not here to save anyone or convert anyone or make anyone see what they are not ready to see. You are here to be what you are, to express what wants to be expressed through you, to live from the deepest truth you know. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. There is a profound relief in this realization. The burden of trying to make others understand, the exhaustion of constantly explaining and justifying and defending, the frustration of feeling misunderstood and misrepresented, all of this falls away. Not because you have become hard or closed or indifferent, but because you have become free. Free from the need for external validation. Free from the prison of other people's opinions. Free to be yourself, fully and completely, without apology or explanation. And paradoxically, when you are free to be yourself without needing others to understand, you often find that you are understood more deeply than ever before. Not by everyone, certainly, but by those who are ready, by those who have done their own inner work, by those who recognize in you what they have discovered in themselves. These connections are rare and precious. They are not based on shared opinions or common interests or mutual benefit. They are based on shared being, on the recognition of the same presence in different forms. These are the connections worth nurturing. Not the connections that require you to constantly explain yourself, to justify your existence, to prove your worth. Those connections, no matter how long they have lasted or how much history they contain, are based on ego and will always be unstable, always requiring maintenance, always threatening to collapse when you fail to meet the other's expectations. But connections based on presence are effortless. They require no maintenance because they are not based on anything that can be lost or damaged. They are based on what is eternal, unchanging, always here. This does not mean these connections are without challenge or conflict. Even two people rooted in presence can have different perspectives, different needs, different ways of expressing themselves. But the conflict, when it arises, is not personal. It is not about defending ego or proving who is right. It is about finding the truth together, about allowing different perspectives to illuminate a larger reality, about growing through the friction rather than being destroyed by it. And when you encounter those who are still deeply identified with ego, who demand explanation and justification, who cannot meet you in presence, you can meet them with compassion rather than frustration. You can see that they are suffering, that their demands come from pain rather than malice, that they are doing the best they can with the level of consciousness available to them. And you can offer them kindness without offering them the explanation they seek. You can be present with them without being pulled into their drama. You can love them without needing them to change. This is perhaps the highest expression of spiritual maturity. Not the ability to transcend the world and live in some blissful state of detachment, but the ability to be fully in the world, fully engaged with others, fully present to life in all its messiness and complexity, while remaining rooted in the peace that passes understanding. To be in the world but not of it, as the ancient saying goes. To participate fully while remaining free. And this freedom is not something you achieve once and then possess forever. It is something you return to, again and again, moment by moment. Because the pull of ego is strong. The conditioning is deep. The habit of identification with thought and emotion and story is ancient and powerful. You will forget. You will get pulled back into the drama. You will find yourself explaining and defending and justifying. And that is not failure. That is simply what happens in the process of awakening. The key is to notice when it happens. To catch yourself in the act of ego identification and to gently, without judgment, return to presence. Not to beat yourself up for forgetting. Not to make it mean something about your spiritual progress or lack thereof. Simply to notice, to smile at the familiar pattern, and to choose again. To choose presence over story, awareness over identification, being over becoming. And each time you make this choice, it becomes a little easier. Not because you are getting better at it, but because you are seeing more clearly that there is nothing to get better at. You are not trying to achieve a state of permanent presence. You are simply recognizing what is already here, what has always been here, what will always be here. And that recognition becomes more stable, more accessible, more obvious, until it is the ground from which you live rather than a peak experience you occasionally touch. From this ground, the question of whether to explain yourself or not becomes irrelevant. You simply respond to each situation as it arises, without a predetermined strategy, without a rule you are following. Sometimes you will offer explanation because it serves the moment. Sometimes you will remain silent because silence is what is needed. Sometimes you will engage in dialogue because there is genuine openness in the other. Sometimes you will walk away because there is only defensiveness and attack. And you will know what to do, not because you have figured it out, but because the wisdom of presence guides you. This wisdom is not infallible. It does not make you perfect or immune to mistakes. But it is aligned with something deeper than personal preference or ego strategy. It is aligned with the movement of life itself, with what wants to happen through you in service of the whole. This is what it means to live from presence rather than from ego. Not to be perfect, not to never make mistakes, not to always say the right thing or do the right thing. But to be aligned with something larger than your personal agenda, to be available to life rather than trying to control it, to be an instrument through which consciousness expresses itself rather than a separate entity trying to get what it wants. And in this alignment, there is a joy that is not dependent on circumstances. Not the joy of getting what you want or achieving your goals or being understood and appreciated, but the joy of being itself, the joy of existence, the joy of participating in the great mystery of life without needing to understand it or control it or explain it. This joy is your birthright. It is what you are beneath all the layers of conditioning and story and identification. It is what remains when everything else is stripped away. So when you feel the pull to explain yourself, to justify your choices, to defend your path, pause. Take a breath. Feel the aliveness in your body. Notice the thoughts moving through your mind. And ask yourself, who is it that needs to explain? Who is it that feels threatened or misunderstood? Is it the awareness that you are, or is it the story of who you think you are? If it is the story, the ego structure, the conditioned self, then you have a choice. You can feed that structure by engaging in explanation and defense, by trying to make others see you the way you want to be seen. Or you can starve it by returning to presence, by resting as the awareness that needs no defense because it cannot be threatened, that requires no explanation because it is self-evident, that seeks no validation because it is already complete. This is not a choice you make once. It is a choice you make moment by moment, situation by situation, interaction by interaction. And sometimes you will choose ego. Sometimes you will get pulled into the drama. Sometimes you will spend hours explaining yourself to someone who will never understand. And that is okay. That is part of being human. The point is not to be perfect but to be aware, to notice when you are identified with ego and to have the option of choosing differently. And over time, as you make this choice more and more often, you will find that the need to explain yourself diminishes. Not because you have become hard or closed, but because you have become free. Free from the tyranny of other people's opinions. Free from the prison of your own self-image. Free to be what you are, to express what wants to be expressed, to live from the deepest truth you know. And in that freedom, you will discover that you are not alone. You are part of a vast network of consciousness, a web of being that connects all things. You are a unique expression of the one life, a particular wave in the infinite ocean, a singular note in the eternal symphony. And your note is needed. Your expression is valuable. Your presence is a gift. Not because of what you do or achieve or become, but simply because you are. This is the truth that the ego can never grasp. The ego believes it must earn its worth, prove its value, justify its existence. But existence needs no justification. Being requires no proof. You are here, and that is enough. You are alive, and that is a miracle. You are aware, and that is the greatest mystery of all. So stop explaining yourself to those who cannot understand. Not from arrogance or superiority, but from a deep knowing that your worth is not up for debate. Your truth is not dependent on consensus. Your path is yours alone to walk, and no one else can validate it or invalidate it. They can only walk their own path, and you can only walk yours. And sometimes the paths intersect, and there is recognition and connection and shared joy. And sometimes the paths diverge, and there is misunderstanding and conflict and the need to let go. Both are part of the dance. Both are expressions of the one life moving through different forms. And you can honor both without being attached to either. You can celebrate the connections that nourish you and release the connections that drain you, all without making it mean anything about your worth or the worth of others. This is the art of living from presence. Not to withdraw from the world, not to avoid relationship, not to hide behind spiritual concepts, but to engage fully while remaining free. To love without attachment. To care without needing to control. To give without expecting return. To be yourself without needing others to validate that self. And when you live this way, something shifts in the field around you. People sense it, even if they cannot name it. They feel the lack of demand in your presence, the absence of manipulation, the spaciousness that allows them to be themselves without judgment. Some will be drawn to this. They will want to be around you, to learn from you, to absorb whatever it is that makes you different. And you can share what you know, not as a teacher with answers, but as a fellow traveler pointing to what you have discovered. Others will be repelled by it. They will sense that you are not playing the game of ego, and this will threaten them. They will try to pull you back into the drama, to make you defend yourself, to prove that you are not as free as you appear. And you can meet their attempts with compassion, understanding that they are not attacking you but defending against their own fear of freedom, their own terror of letting go of the familiar structures that have defined them. Because freedom is terrifying to the ego. The ego thrives on structure, on knowing who it is and who it is not, on maintaining boundaries and defending territory. Freedom threatens all of that. Freedom says there is no territory to defend because there is no separate self that owns anything. Freedom says there are no boundaries because everything is connected, everything is one. Freedom says you are not who you think you are, and that can feel like death to the ego. And in a sense, it is death. Not the death of the body, but the death of identification with the limited self. The death of the story you have been telling yourself about who you are. The death of the need to be special, to be right, to be understood. And this death is painful. It is a kind of grief, a mourning for the loss of something that was never real but felt so solid, so important, so much like you. But on the other side of this death is rebirth. Not into a new story, not into a better version of yourself, but into what you have always been beneath all the stories. Into the awareness that is reading these words, the consciousness that is hearing these sounds, the presence that is here before thought begins and remains after thought ends. This is not a new you. This is the real you, the you that has been here all along, patiently waiting to be recognized. And when you recognize this, when you know yourself as awareness rather than as the content of awareness, everything changes and nothing changes. The world continues as it was. Your body continues to age. Your mind continues to think. Your emotions continue to flow. But your relationship to all of it shifts fundamentally. You are no longer lost in it. You are the space in which it all happens. From this space, you can watch the ego do its dance without being the dancer. You can observe thoughts arise and dissolve without believing you are the thinker. You can feel emotions move through you without identifying as the one who feels. And in this observation, in this witnessing, there is a freedom that cannot be taken away by any circumstance, any person, any event. This is the freedom that comes from no longer needing to explain yourself. Because there is no self to explain. There is only this moment, this breath, this awareness. And awareness needs no explanation. It is self-evident. It is what is most obvious, most immediate, most undeniable. You cannot doubt that you are aware. You can doubt everything else, every belief, every perception, every thought. But you cannot doubt awareness itself because the very act of doubting requires awareness. So rest here, in this awareness. Not as a practice, not as something you do, but as what you are. Let the thoughts come and go. Let the emotions rise and fall. Let the world spin its endless drama. And remain as the stillness in which all of this movement occurs. This is your true home. This is what you have been seeking in all your seeking. This is the peace that passes understanding. And from this peace, you can engage with the world in a new way. Not from need, not from fear, not from the compulsion to prove or defend or explain. But from fullness, from love, from the natural overflow of being. You can speak when speaking serves. You can be silent when silence serves. You can act when action is needed. You can rest when rest is called for. And all of it flows naturally, effortlessly, without the friction of ego trying to control outcomes. This is what it means to live in alignment with the Tao, with the Dharma, with the will of God, whatever words you use to point to the intelligence that moves through all things. It is not about following rules or adhering to beliefs or achieving some ideal state. It is about getting out of the way, about allowing life to live through you rather than trying to live life according to your limited understanding. And when you live this way, you discover that life knows what it is doing. It does not need your constant interference, your endless planning, your anxious controlling. It has been unfolding for billions of years without your help, and it will continue to unfold long after this particular form dissolves. Your role is not to direct the unfolding but to participate in it, to be a conscious expression of it, to allow it to express itself through you in whatever way it chooses. And sometimes it will choose to express itself through explanation. Sometimes you will find yourself speaking at length about your path, your choices, your understanding. And that is fine. That is part of the dance. The difference is that you are not attached to the outcome. You are not speaking to convince or convert or defend. You are simply allowing the words to flow, and if they land in fertile soil, wonderful. If they do not, equally wonderful. Because your peace does not depend on being understood. Your peace depends on nothing. It is not conditional. It is not earned. It is not the result of circumstances aligning in a particular way. It is the ground of your being, always here, always available, always waiting to be recognized. And the recognition is simple. It requires no special knowledge, no years of practice, no guru or technique or method. It requires only this: stop. Be still. Notice what is here when you are not lost in thought, when you are not identified with emotion, when you are not caught in the story of yourself. What is here is awareness. Pure, simple, undeniable awareness. And this awareness is what you are. Not what you have. Not what you experience. But what you are at the deepest level. And when you know this, when you rest as this, the need to explain yourself to anyone falls away like autumn leaves from a tree. Not because you have decided it should fall away, but because it is no longer relevant. It is no longer part of your experience. You are free. Not free to do whatever you want without consequences. Not free from the challenges and difficulties of human life. But free in the deepest sense. Free from the tyranny of ego. Free from the prison of self-image. Free from the endless seeking that never finds what it is looking for because it is looking in the wrong place. What you are seeking is here. It has always been here. It will always be here. It is the here itself, the now itself, the awareness itself. And it is so close, so intimate, so obvious that it is easily missed. The mind looks for something extraordinary, something dramatic, something other than this simple, ordinary, ever-present awareness. But this is it. This is the treasure hidden in plain sight. This is the kingdom of heaven within. This is what all the mystics and sages and awakened beings have been pointing to across all cultures and all times. And you do not need to believe them. You do not need to take it on faith. You can verify it for yourself, right now, in this moment. Simply notice. Notice that you are aware. Notice that this awareness is here, constant, unchanging, regardless of what is happening in your experience. Notice that you are not your thoughts, because you can observe your thoughts. Notice that you are not your emotions, because you can feel your emotions. Notice that you are not your body, because you can sense your body. So what are you? You are the one who observes, the one who feels, the one who senses. You are the awareness in which all experience arises. And this awareness is not personal. It is not yours. It is the universal consciousness expressing itself as this particular point of view, this particular perspective, this particular form. And when you know this, when you rest as this, you discover that you are not separate from anything. You are intimately connected to everything. You are the whole expressing itself as a part, the ocean expressing itself as a wave, the infinite expressing itself as the finite. And in this recognition, the question of whether to explain yourself becomes absurd. How can you explain the infinite? How can you justify the ocean? How can you defend the whole? You cannot. And you do not need to. You simply are. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. So let others think what they will. Let them judge, criticize, misunderstand. Let them demand explanation and justification. You can meet their demands with silence or with words, with engagement or with withdrawal, according to what the moment requires. But you are no longer driven by the need to make them see. You are no longer enslaved by the fear of being misunderstood. You are free. Free to be what you are. Free to express what wants to be expressed. Free to live from the deepest truth you know. And this freedom is contagious. When you embody it, when you live it, when you are it, others sense it. They may not understand it. They may not be able to articulate it. But they feel something in your presence that calls to something in them. A possibility. A reminder. An invitation to remember what they have forgotten, to recognize what they have overlooked, to return to what they have never truly left. You do not need to preach or teach or convince. You simply need to be. And your being becomes the teaching. Your presence becomes the message. Your life becomes the invitation. Not because you are special or superior or more evolved, but because you have remembered what you are. And in that remembering, you become a reminder for others. This is the true meaning of service. Not doing things for others to earn merit or feel good about yourself, but being what you are so fully, so completely, so authentically that your very existence serves the awakening of consciousness in all beings. You do not need to try to serve. Service happens naturally when you are aligned with what you are. Because what you are is not separate from what others are. What you are is the one consciousness expressing itself through infinite forms. And when one form awakens, it serves the awakening of all forms. So do not worry about those who do not understand. Do not exhaust yourself trying to explain what cannot be explained in words. Do not diminish your light to make others comfortable with their darkness. Shine. Be. Express. And trust that those who are ready will see. Those who are ready will hear. Those who are ready will recognize in you what they are beginning to recognize in themselves. And those who are not ready, bless them and let them go. Not with judgment or superiority, but with compassion and understanding. They are exactly where they need to be in their journey. And you are exactly where you need to be in yours. And the journey is not linear. It is not a progression from less to more, from ignorant to enlightened, from asleep to awake. It is a spiral, a dance, a play of consciousness exploring itself through infinite variations. Sometimes you will be the one who appears more awake. Sometimes you will be the one who appears more asleep. Sometimes you will be the teacher. Sometimes you will be the student. Sometimes you will be the one offering wisdom. Sometimes you will be the one receiving it. And all of it is perfect. All of it is part of the dance. All of it is consciousness playing with itself, exploring itself, knowing itself through relationship, through contrast, through the endless interplay of form. So relax. Let go of the need to be anywhere other than where you are. Let go of the need to be anyone other than who you are. Let go of the need to explain or justify or defend. You are here. You are alive. You are aware. And that is the greatest miracle of all. Everything else is just details, just the particular way consciousness is expressing itself through this form in this moment. And the details will change. The form will age and eventually dissolve. The circumstances will shift and transform. The relationships will come and go. But what you are remains constant. The awareness that is reading these words now is the same awareness that was here when you were a child, that will be here when you are old, that is here in joy and in sorrow, in success and in failure, in understanding and in confusion. This awareness is your true identity. Not the story of your life. Not the roles you play. Not the achievements you accumulate or the failures you endure. But the awareness itself, the consciousness itself, the presence itself. And when you know yourself as this, when you rest as this, when you live from this, everything becomes simpler. Not easier necessarily, but simpler. Because you are no longer fighting reality. You are no longer resisting what is. You are no longer trying to make life conform to your preferences. You are simply here, present, available to whatever is arising. And from this availability, you respond rather than react. You create rather than defend. You love rather than fear. Not because you have become a better person, but because you have stopped being a person in the limited sense and recognized yourself as the awareness in which personhood appears. This does not mean you lose your personality or become some bland, generic spiritual being. Your unique expression remains. Your particular gifts and talents and quirks remain. But they are no longer taken so seriously. They are no longer the totality of what you are. They are simply the way consciousness is expressing itself through this particular form. And that expression is valuable, is needed, is part of the whole. But it is not all of you. It is not what you are at the deepest level. What you are at the deepest level is beyond expression, beyond description, beyond comprehension. It is the mystery at the heart of existence, the source from which all things arise and to which all things return. And you do not need to understand it. You do not need to explain it. You simply need to be it. And you are already being it. You have never not been it. You could not be it even if you tried. The only question is whether you recognize it or not. And the recognition is always available. Not as a future attainment, not as a reward for spiritual practice, but as the ever-present reality of this moment. Right now, as you hear these words, as you feel the breath moving in your body, as you sense the aliveness that is here, you are in direct contact with what you are. Not thinking about it. Not conceptualizing it. But being it, living it, expressing it. And when you live from this recognition, when you abide as this awareness, the need to explain yourself to others dissolves like mist in the morning sun. Not because you have become indifferent or arrogant, but because you have become free. Free from the prison of self-concern. Free from the tyranny of other people's opinions. Free from the endless seeking that never finds what it is looking for. You have found what you were seeking. Or rather, you have recognized that you never lost it. It was always here, always available, always present. You were simply looking in the wrong direction, seeking outside yourself what could only be found within, trying to become what you already are. And now, having recognized this, having seen through the illusion of separation, having awakened from the dream of ego, you can live differently. Not perfectly. Not without challenges or difficulties or moments of forgetting. But with a fundamental shift in your relationship to everything. You are no longer at war with reality. You are no longer trying to force life to conform to your will. You are no longer defending a self that was never real. You are simply here, present, alive, aware. And from this simple being, everything flows. Wisdom arises without effort. Compassion flows without trying. Action happens without the friction of resistance. And you move through life like water, taking the shape of whatever container you find yourself in, flowing around obstacles rather than fighting them, always moving toward the ocean of your true nature. This is the way of presence. This is the path of awakening. Not a path that leads somewhere else, but a path that reveals where you already are. Not a journey toward a distant goal, but a recognition of what has always been here. Not a becoming, but a being. Not an achievement, but a surrender. Not a gaining, but a letting go. Let go of the need to be understood. Let go of the need to be right. Let go of the need to be special or significant or important. Let go of the need to explain yourself, justify yourself, defend yourself. Let go of all of it. And in that letting go, discover what remains. Discover what cannot be let go of because it is what you are. Discover the awareness that is here before all gaining and after all losing, the presence that is constant in a world of change, the peace that is available in every moment regardless of circumstances. This is your inheritance. This is your birthright. This is what you are beneath all the layers of conditioning and story and identification. And it is here now, waiting to be recognized. Not in some future moment when you have finally done enough or become enough or understood enough. But now, in this breath, in this moment of simple being, feel it. Not as an idea but as a direct experience. The sense of being here, of existing, of awareness itself. It is so simple, so obvious, so immediate that it is easily overlooked. But it is the most profound reality available to you. More real than your thoughts. More real than your emotions. More real than your body. More real than anything you can perceive or conceive. And when you rest as this, when you abide as this, when you live from this, you discover that you have always been free. The prison was never real. The chains were made of thought. The walls were constructed from belief. And all of it can dissolve in a moment of clear seeing, in a moment of recognition, in a moment of returning to what you have always been. So stop explaining yourself to those who cannot understand. Not from a place of judgment or superiority, but from a place of deep inner knowing. You know what you are. You know what is true. You know what your path requires. And this knowing is enough. It does not need validation from others. It does not need agreement or approval or understanding. It is complete in itself, self-evident, arising from the source of all knowing. Trust this knowing. Trust this awareness. Trust this presence. It is more reliable than any external authority, more trustworthy than any expert or teacher or guru. Because it is what you are. It is your direct connection to the intelligence that moves through all things, the consciousness that animates all life, the source from which everything arises. And when you trust this, when you live from this, when you allow this to guide you, you discover that you do not need to explain yourself. You do not need to justify your choices. You do not need to defend your path. You simply walk it. You simply live it. You simply be it. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. The world may not understand. People may judge. They may criticize. They may demand explanation. And you can meet their demands with compassion, with kindness, with love. But you do not need to meet them with explanation. You do not need to convince them or convert them or make them see what they are not ready to see. You simply need to be what you are. And your being will speak louder than any words could ever speak. Your presence will communicate what explanation cannot. Your peace will demonstrate what argument cannot prove. Your freedom will invite what persuasion cannot compel. Because truth does not need defense. It does not need explanation. It simply is. And when you embody it, when you live it, when you are it, others will sense it. They may not understand it. They may not be able to name it. But they will feel it. And for those who are ready, that feeling will be enough to awaken something within them, to remind them of what they have forgotten, to call them home to what they have always been. This is your gift to the world. Not your explanations. Not your justifications. Not your defenses. But your presence. Your being. Your embodiment of the truth that sets all beings free. The truth that you are not a separate self struggling to survive in a hostile universe. The truth that you are the universe itself, expressing itself through this particular form, exploring itself through this particular perspective, knowing itself through this particular experience. And when you know this, when you live this, when you are this, everything changes. Not the external circumstances necessarily, though they may change as well. But your relationship to everything. You are no longer fighting life. You are no longer resisting what is. You are no longer trying to make reality conform to your preferences. You are simply here, present, available, allowing life to live through you rather than trying to live life according to your limited understanding. And in this allowing, in this surrender, in this letting go of control, you discover a power far greater than the power of ego. Not the power to dominate or control or manipulate, but the power of alignment, the power of flow, the power of being in harmony with the movement of life itself. This power does not force. It does not push. It does not struggle. It simply allows. And in that allowing, everything that needs to happen happens naturally, effortlessly, without the friction of resistance. This is the power of presence. This is the strength of awareness. This is the freedom of being. And it is available to you now, in this moment, not as something you need to achieve or become, but as what you already are. You simply need to recognize it. You simply need to stop looking elsewhere and see what is here. You simply need to stop trying to become something and rest as what you are. And in that resting, in that recognition, in that simple being, you will find everything you have been seeking. Not as an object you possess, but as what you are. Not as a state you achieve, but as the ground from which all states arise. Not as a future attainment, but as the ever-present reality of this moment. So let the words fade now. Let the concepts dissolve. Let the mind become quiet. And simply be. Be here. Be now. Be aware. And in that simple being, discover the freedom that has always been yours, the peace that has always been available, the love that has always been here, waiting to be recognized. You do not need to explain yourself. You do not need to justify your existence. You do not need to defend your truth. You simply need to be. And in that being, you will discover that you are enough. You have always been enough. You will always be enough. Not because of what you do or achieve or become, but because of what you are. And what you are is the awareness in which all doing and achieving and becoming arises. This awareness is not personal. It is not yours. It is the universal consciousness expressing itself as you, through you, in you. And when you recognize this, when you know this, when you live from this, you discover that you are not separate from anything. You are intimately connected to everything. You are the whole expressing itself as a part. You are the infinite expressing itself as the finite. You are the eternal expressing itself in time. And this recognition brings with it a profound peace. Not the peace of having everything you want. Not the peace of being understood and appreciated. But the peace of being aligned with what is, of accepting reality as it is, of surrendering to the flow of life rather than fighting against it. This peace is not dependent on circumstances. It is not conditional. It is the ground of your being, always here, always available, always waiting to be recognized. And when you rest in this peace, when you abide as this peace, when you live from this peace, you become a source of peace for others. Not because you are trying to be peaceful or trying to spread peace, but because peace is what you are. And what you are radiates naturally, effortlessly, without any doing on your part. You do not need to try to be peaceful. You simply need to stop being at war. You simply need to stop resisting what is. You simply need to stop trying to make reality conform to your preferences. And in that stopping, in that ceasing of resistance, peace reveals itself. Not as something new, but as what has always been here beneath the noise, beneath the struggle, beneath the endless commentary of the mind. Peace is your natural state. It is what remains when everything else falls away. It is what you are when you are not being anything else. So be nothing else. Be what you are. Be awareness. Be presence. Be peace. And from that being, live your life. Make your choices. Walk your path. And let others think what they will. Let them judge, criticize, misunderstand. It does not matter. What matters is that you are true to what you know, aligned with what you are, living from the deepest truth available to you. And that truth is simple. You are not a separate self. You are not isolated and alone. You are not fundamentally flawed or lacking or incomplete. You are the awareness in which all experience arises. You are the consciousness that animates all life. You are the presence that is here before all coming and after all going. You are what you have always been and what you will always be, regardless of what happens in the realm of form. This is not a belief. This is not a philosophy. This is not a concept to be understood intellectually. This is the living reality of your being, available to be recognized in any moment, in any circumstance, regardless of what is happening in your life. And the recognition is simple. It requires no special knowledge, no years of practice, no guru or technique or method. It requires only this: stop. Be still. Notice what is here. What is here is awareness. What is here is presence. What is here is peace. And this is what you are. Not what you have. Not what you experience. But what you are at the deepest level. And when you know this, when you rest as this, when you live from this, the need to explain yourself to anyone falls away naturally, effortlessly, without any doing on your part. Because there is no one left who needs explaining. There is only this moment, this breath, this awareness. And awareness needs no explanation. It is self-evident. It is what is most obvious, most immediate, most undeniable. You cannot doubt that you are aware. You can doubt everything else. But you cannot doubt awareness itself. So rest as this awareness. Abide as this presence. Lie from this peace. And let the world spin its endless drama. Let people demand explanation. Let them judge and criticize and misunderstand. You can meet them with compassion, with kindness, with love. But you do not need to meet them with explanation. You do not need to convince them or convert them or make them see. You simply need to be what you are. And what you are is enough. What you are is complete. What you are is whole. Not because you have achieved something or become something or understood something, but because what you are is the source from which all achievement and becoming and understanding arises. You are the ground, not the figure. You are the space, not the content. You are the awareness, not the object of awareness. And when you know yourself as this, when you recognize yourself as this, when you live as this, everything becomes clear. Not in the sense that you understand everything intellectually, but in the sense that you see the simplicity beneath the complexity, the stillness beneath the movement, the silence beneath the noise. You see that all the drama, all the struggle, all the seeking and striving and explaining is happening on the surface. And you are the depth. You are the ocean, not the wave. You are the sky, not the cloud. You are the awareness, not the thought. And from this depth, from this ground, from this awareness, you can watch the waves rise and fall, the clouds come and go, the thoughts arise and dissolve, without being disturbed by any of it. Because you know what you are. And what you are cannot be touched by anything that happens in the realm of form. This is the ultimate freedom. Not freedom from circumstances. Not freedom from challenges or difficulties or pain. But freedom in the midst of all of it. Freedom to be present with whatever is arising without being identified with it, without being defined by it, without being diminished by it. Freedom to be yourself, fully and completely, regardless of what others think or say or do. And this freedom is your birthright. It is not something you need to earn or deserve or achieve. It is what you are. It has always been what you are. It will always be what you are. The only question is whether you recognize it or not. And the recognition is always available, always here, always now. So recognize it now. Not as a future possibility. Not as something you will understand later. But now. In this moment. In this breath. In this simple awareness of being. You are here. You are aware. You are present. And that is all you need to know. That is all you need to be. That is all you have ever been. Everything else is just the play of consciousness, the dance of form, the expression of the infinite in the finite. And you can participate in this play, this dance, this expression, without being lost in it. You can engage fully with life without being identified with the one who engages. You can love without attachment. You can care without needing to control. You can give without expecting return. You can be yourself without needing others to validate that self. This is the art of living from presence. This is the way of awakening. Not a path that leads somewhere else, but a recognition of where you already are. Not a journey toward a distant goal, but a seeing of what has always been here. Not a becoming, but a being. Not an achievement, but a surrender. Not a gaining, but a letting go of everything that is not you, everything that has never been you, everything that could never be you. And what remains when everything else is let go is what you are. Pure awareness. Simple presence. Unconditional peace. This is your true nature. This is your deepest reality. This is what you have been seeking in all your seeking. And it is here now, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be lived, waiting to be expressed through this unique form that you are. So stop explaining yourself to those who cannot understand. Not from arrogance or superiority, but from a deep knowing that your truth does not need defense, your path does not need justification, your being does not need explanation. You are what you are. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. Live from this knowing. Walk from this ground. Be from this awareness. And let your life be the teaching, your presence be the message, your being be the invitation. Not an invitation to believe something or follow someone or adopt a particular practice, but an invitation to remember what you are, to recognize what has always been here, to return to the source from which you have never truly departed. This is the gift you offer the world. Not through doing, but through being. Not through explaining, but through embodying. Not through convincing, but through living. And this gift is needed now more than ever, in a world lost in ego, trapped in separation, suffering from the illusion of isolation. Your presence, your peace, your freedom is a beacon in the darkness, a reminder of what is possible, an invitation to awaken. So be that beacon. Not by trying to be anything special. Not by making yourself into some ideal spiritual being. But simply by being what you are, by recognizing what you are, by living from what you are. And trust that this is enough. Trust that your being serves the whole in ways you cannot see or understand. Trust that consciousness knows what it is doing, that life knows how to unfold, that the intelligence that moves through all things is moving through you as well. And now, the words fade, but the silence remains. If you felt the stillness within this message, stay. Subscribe, not to follow, but to remember again and again that presence is always here, waiting beneath every thought. The true teaching is not in the words you just heard, but in the space between them.